Farmers across the country have planted 71% of the country's soybean crop, but the nation's largest bean producer has a problem. Iowa is currently enduring its slowest pace of soybean planting since 1993. At 35 percentage points behind its 5-year average, Iowa trails only Wisconsin for progress compared to normal. It's also facing another unusual issue. On June 2nd, a crop consultant found soybean cyst nematode females on roots of susceptible plants which were planted 26 days prior. Iowa State Extension plant pathologist Tylka told DTN he was surprised because in a cool spring like 2013, he would have estimated SCN emergence at 40 to 45 days after planting. In February at the World Soybean Research Conference in South Africa, we talked with Greg about the exceptional conditions nematodes faced in 2012 and how effective seed has become in managing a yield-crushing pest.
It's a great way for farmers to manage soybean cyst nematode. There are hundreds of varieties for farmers throughout the Midwest to pick from that have resistance to soybean cyst. One of the weaknesses is that all those varieties, or almost all of them, contain one same set of genes. But in general, it's effective at continuing to produce high yields, although we are seeing the nematode starting to build up the ability to reproduce on that common type of resistance.
Right, what does that mean? What does it mean when you say that they offer the same type of resistance, and then how does it adapt?
So we talk about the different types of resistance as sources of resistance. The soybean breeders of the world would consider them breeding lines, but they're breeding lines of soybeans that have good pest resistance but not very good agronomic traits. So they cross those with high-yielding soybeans to get high-yielding soybeans with good nematode resistance, but it involves the same set of 4 or 5 genes. And so over time, if you use that same type of resistance over and over again, the nematode gets selected for. It builds up the ability to reproduce on that resistance. I liken it much to like weed becoming resistant to glyphosate or Roundup.
How does it affect yield, though?
Well, what I presented on today was, surprisingly, it hasn't affected yield yet. So it's not a good thing that our nematode is building up numbers on resistant varieties, but we haven't seen it take a big yield hit yet. So I'm still a little nervous, but what I tell farmers in Iowa, for example, is I jokingly say the sky's not falling yet, but it is getting a little cloudy. So it's not a good thing that our SCN populations are building up on the common type of resistance, but the take-home message today was it hasn't really hurt our yields yet.
One of the notes you said today was 2012. All the research was sort of along the same lines until you got to 2012.
Right.
How so?
Never seen anything like it before. 2012 was a drought in Iowa, as in much of the Midwest, and nematode reproduction was absolutely crazy. I can't come up with a better word for it. Yields were surprisingly not bad at all, in fact surprisingly good, but I have never seen soybean cyst nematode reproduce on both susceptible and resistant soybeans to the level I did in 2012. And they're predicting very dry conditions for 2013, so I'm curious to see if it happens again.
Right, just to see if it's an anomaly or not?
Right. As a scientist, we always want to do replications, and so 2013 might be a repeat of 2012, and I'll be real curious to see if we see it again.
Speaking of, as you look at the future here, what do you think is next? What do you think needs to be looked at?
Well, farmers need to definitely know if they have soybean cyst nematode, they need to get in a good rotation with non-host crops like corn. And in their soybean years, they need to plant good soybean cyst nematode varieties. And then they probably should think about these new seed treatments that Syngenta and Bayer and other companies are offering for even added protection against soybean cyst nematode.
Are there any drawbacks to planting a resistant variety yield-wise?
Or
cost-wise?
Yeah, not anymore. The resistant varieties, you don't pay a premium for the bag of seed, and anymore they yield very, very well even in the presence of low nematode numbers or no SCN. So I can kind of think how you're thinking, and some farmers just jump right to it and say, well, if soybean cyst nematode is around, I'm just going to grow a cyst-resistant soybean for protection, and that's not a bad choice.
How prevalent is it in Iowa and across the Midwest?
Well, in Iowa, through random surveys done a couple times, 74% of the fields, so 3 out of 4 fields, In Illinois, it's more like 4 out of every 5 fields, and in Nebraska, it's just going to continue to spread. Most of the soybean producing counties, it's already been found, and I haven't seen any random survey data yet, but I'm sure it's quite common.
But in the end, you think we're making headway on this?
Oh, I do. I think we are. The key for farmers is to catch it when numbers are low. It's much easier to keep low numbers low than it is to drive high numbers down. And so farmers really need to test their fields by either pulling soil samples and sending them to the university there in Lincoln, or digging roots and looking for the nematode during the growing season.